this is important because to me, manifestation is it's a new age term for prayer.
Mm.
And if there's some form of divine agency that is moving through our body, then I would invite people to consider that prayer is not something you do when you go to church. It's not something you do when you go to temple or mosque or 15 minutes in the morning and 15 minutes at night. We are living embodiments of prayer. Everything we do is a prayer. Every word, every action, every thought is a prayer. We are praying. And the world right now there's so much misalignment and chaos. Because even when we don't realize we're praying, we're still praying.
Hey everybody, welcome to Sound Bombing. I created this show for people who want to experience a radical, life-changing journey through the sounds of my diverse guests. I hope that each sound you hear on this show will strengthen your faith, encourage your dreams, and challenge you to awaken the greatness within you.
Drop the bomb. Drop the bomb. We're gonna drop the bomb. Drop the bomb. We're gonna drop the bomb. Drop the bomb. We come to drop the bomb. Drop the bomb.
This is a journey into sound. A journey which along the way will bring to you new color, new dimension, new values, and a new experience.
Ladies and gentlemen, the star of the show,
LaMarr, Darnell.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whatever the time of the day it is. I am your host, Dr. LaMarr Darnell Shields, and I'm so excited that you decided to hang out with me today. Like Jay-Z said, you could have been anywhere in the world, but you decided to click on the Sound Bombing link. And I'm so grateful and honored that you decided to do that because there's so much information that's out there and there's so many podcasts that you can choose from. But because you decided to hang out with me, as always, we have a special treat. If you like the show, we ask you to subscribe. We ask you to stop being stingy. There's so much of me to go around. Listen, we're on every platform. So click that like button, subscribe, and share it. I'm the creator of Sound Bombing, of course, and my goal with this show is to introduce you to people with ideas that will help you unlock your full potential, like my last guest, Dr. Kevin Reese, who wrote the book, Peace Over Pain. If you missed that show, go back and check it out. Kevin dropped some jewels. He talked about health and wellness. He talked about mindfulness. He talked about meditation. He talked about staying away from certain foods. Fried food, foods with gluten, fake foods. He talked about a whole bunch of stuff. And I'm sure a whole bunch of folks got upset, especially when he talked about staying away from fried foods. Well, today we're going to continue that conversation, but not with Dr. Kevin Reese, with another brother. See, you all know, or if you don't know, I love yoga. I've been practicing yoga probably for 10 or 15 years. Just like some people are new to the process of yoga. Like I tell people, I'm an old school OG vegan. My hashtag is meat free since 93. So I'm not new to some of this stuff, but I'm also open to new ideas and new ways of thinking. But you know, the past year, we saw a huge shift in the way that we practice yoga. And it is also saw a huge change in the landscape of way that people are approaching the practice. Many have settled into their life at home because of COVID. Living rooms were quickly converted into yoga studios. I done walked in a whole bunch of houses that smelled like a yoga studios during the pandemic. And many have learned to expect the doorbell to ring when they just started their session. The current or the outgoing situation also has created a surge in mental health concerns with anxiety on the rise, stress-related disorders, strongly associated with increased financial difficulties, bereavements, social isolation. We are animals that need touch, and also our mental health. And so yoga is a process. Yoga is a tool that one can use to deal with mental health challenges. It helps you to be still, and a regular practice can help you alleviate stress and anxiety. So why am I talking about that? Because I traveled all the way to Trinidad and Tobago to find my next guest, who attended the University of Tampa. I actually got a chance to speak there. During his senior year at university, he participated in a study abroad program called Semester at Sea, taking him to 15 different countries, exposed him to health and cultures and experiences, and I'm sure some good food. After graduating from the University of Troy, he traversed to one of my favorite places, Costa Rica, coast to coast on foot, and has spent prolonged periods in silence. Of course, I ain't been in too many silent places because I talk so much. Now that I get paid to talk, but maybe I do need a silent retreat. Maybe he can give me some tools on how to do that, because sometimes it's important to be silent and be still. But after this, my next guest graduated. He returned, of course, back to Trinidad. Who would not want to go back to Trinidad and Tobago? It's a beautiful place. Then he moved on and started his own business, nurturing and building a beautiful yoga community and studio, One Yoga Trinidad, recently rebranding as Beyond Yoga TV. He is the author of Popcorn in My Pocket, a book laced with philosophical insights and teachings that expand our perspective of the human experience, reveals spiritual practice of daily living in one place unimaginable, and infinite love within our reach. Who am I talking about? I'm talking about Troy Hadeed. Troy, welcome to Sound Bombing, brother. How you doing?
Yeah, thanks for having me, LaMarr. I'm good. It's such a pleasure and an honor. What an intro that was.
Hey, man, you on Gaia TV. You got your own TV program. You have people all over the country, and you're from a place that I have not got a chance to visit. But let me just tell you how the universe shows up. My good friend, writer, director, producer, his name is Mark Laveau. Mark just texted me 5 minutes before our show. Mark is from Trinidad. He just returned because his mom transitioned. I have not spoken with him since then, but right before I came on, I looked at my phone. He says, Brother Shields, give me a call so we can connect. So shout out to my brother, Mark Laveau. He's your homeboy, always talking about this beautiful place that you live. And I'm looking forward to going there. And I'm looking forward to the conversation.
He's here right now?
He just came. I'm assuming he's back in the States because he asked me to give him a call. But I found out through the grapevine that his mom transitioned. Really beautiful brother, man. He's a producer, teacher, educator. We worked on several shows together. And I heard it through the grapevine that his mom transitioned. And I knew he wasn't picking up the phone because I assumed, dealing with that. But then also being in Trinidad and having to deal with that. So, hey, brother, your voice and his voice are one collective.
Yeah, I was going to say, if he was here, give him my number. I'll pick him up. I'll close here. I'll go meet him.
Oh, well, I already sent him I told him, I said, when I get off this interview with Troy, I'm going to make sure that you all connect. I sent him your link, and Mark knows everybody. I'm sure you guys have crossed paths. But man, welcome to Sound Bombing, man. We like to do a wellness check-in. Let our listeners know how you're doing, man. How are you feeling today?
Yeah, today I'm feeling great. I'm feeling really good. It's been raining a lot in Trinidad. So sometimes you forget you live in a sunny Caribbean island as of lately. But yeah, I'm good. I'm good. I'm in a period in my life where I always say it's like you just kind of waiting. There's so much things moving. You're just kind of looking to see what's calling to you and where you need to move to. So that's where I'm at. But I'm good. I'm good. Today's good. I feel good. I've done my yoga practice for the morning.
Well, listen, I did my yoga practice as well. I tell people you don't have to go to a yoga studio. And when I'm in a hotel like I am right now, I get a towel. I get a couple of towels. I get some bottled water. I may find at the end of a chair because, Troy, people look for a lot of excuses of not doing what they do when they're in their own spaces. Yeah. I'm traveling with everything. So we're going to unpack and talk about all those things, man. But I want to get down and ask you this question, man. Troy, how did you discover yoga? And then when did you come face to face with yoga for the very first time?
Man, that alone could be a question. That could be an hour alone in itself. So I'm going to try to make it brief because it is such a powerful story as well, right? I've been teaching now for about 15 years. And for those years, everywhere I travel and teach internationally, people ask, well, how did you find yoga? And I kind of say, well, yoga actually kind of found me. I graduated from university, and even from then, people would ask me, "Well, what are you gonna do with your life?" I was 21. I would say, "I'm gonna teach yoga." They would say, "Do you do yoga?" I would say, "No, but I know I'm gonna teach yoga." So people ask, "All right, so then where was your first influence of yoga?" And the only thing I could put my finger on was I went to Fatima College, which is like a boys' school. And when I was 14 years old, I remember going up every lunchtime. I would give up my lunchtime and I'd go and sit down with a teacher called Mr. Gayadeen. And he would give me these texts to read, right? These Eastern culture, Eastern tradition texts to read. And I always said that I hope one day I could come face to face with Mr. Gayadeen again. I haven't seen him since I was 14 years old, and tell him how he may have influenced my life. Well, LaMarr, about 3 years ago, I got this message off my website. When people comment on my website, it kind of comes into your email. Most of them are spam, so they go to junk. But this one came through and it read, "I think I gave you practice of brahmacharya to read in 1994 Fatima College, S. Gayadeen." And I was like, "No way. This can't be." And so I replied to him. And then I got his number and I called him immediately. So he says to me that, "Well, first off, Troy, you were sent to detention. That's when you first came into my room. You were actually sent to detention." And he says that he gave me that book to read as a joke because the practice of brahmacharya is a text about sexual misconduct. So he gave it to a 14-year-old boy to read as a joke. He said, "I don't even do yoga. I'm not even of a Hindu lineage." Like, it was a joke to me. And he said that I sat and I devoured that book that most adults couldn't read. And then after that, I came up every lunchtime of my own free will to read more and read more and read more. And what's really amazing is he says to me, he said, "Troy, now I teach in Ontario, Canada. And I've been talking about you for the last 25 years. So I was talking about him and he was talking about me, but we had no contact whatsoever for 25 years. And he says to me, "The way I found you is because I was talking about you in my class in Canada today. And they Googled your name."
Some young people.
Yeah.
And leave it up to some young people. They will definitely find you.
Yeah. So they were like, "Do you know he's an international yoga teacher?" And then he was like, "What?" He had no idea what had come of my life. So, the synchronicity, as he explains it, the synchronicity without a word of how we had impacted one another's life in such a profound way without even really knowing it, without the intention.
I love those stories because as you're thinking, I am a teacher. I've always been a teacher. I think when I came out the womb, I was teaching, but also a student. And I love these stories because as you're talking, I'm thinking about Jay-Z. And I know before we started talking, I was joking around about Jay-Z, whose actually birthday is today.
Wow.
And his elementary school teacher, his English teacher, talked about him getting in trouble and how she would force him to write and do these things and how he constantly acknowledges this woman. And it's like your teacher talking about you, and then this young people finding, and they're like, "Sure, because of course the teacher is like, yeah, you don't know Jay-Z. I met Tupac's. I met one of Tupac's teachers who works for the library, who actually gave Tupac. He won a prize when he was a poet and didn't have transportation to get there to the library to receive the prize. He was that poor. She kept the poem, but it's something about these connections that as student and teachers have, even when we're across waters, even when we're across mountains and valleys, the fact that you can still acknowledge your teacher. I have several teachers. Shout out to Dr. Francis Staten, who's a teacher at Grambling State University in Louisiana, who got me into research and studying. And I was studying Black farmers, and I was studying African-American men and who lived over 100 years. They were centurions. And of course, they're doing these things and not realizing that the seeds that they're planting are going to eventually grow, maybe not in their time. And
Yeah.
so I think about you when I first went to approach the mat. I think about, trying to do these. I'm looking at these teachers like, ain't no way in hell I can do that eventually. But it's something about great teaching that was passed on to you. And speaking of that, so why did you decide to start teaching yoga? And then what qualities do you feel are important to build and work as a yoga teacher? Because this is like the new thing. Everybody, like I was joked about being a vegan, and everybody has a mat under their arm and things. So, what are some of the qualities, and why did you start teaching yoga?
Yeah. Well, I think I first have to say, LaMarr, I think you see, when we think of yoga, we think of postures. And I'll get to that. But to me, that's not really yoga. That's just these postures we do, that's a tool. That's a tool in which we use to practice what yoga is, right? So for me, I believe from a really young age, I was trying to practice yoga and believed in yoga without I even knew what yoga was. Because what yoga is at the fundamental core is union with God. What yoga is the embodiment of absolute love. It's about seeing God in all of creation. That's what this word namaste means. God in me sees the God in you. So I believed it started really early on. I grew up in a Catholic home. And even though I kind of moved away from organized religion, even to this day, I believe Christ was one of the greatest yogis that ever walked the planet. And to answer your question, I was about maybe 24. And I started actually practicing asana, postures, on a regular, committed basis. And as I started practicing, I kind of just heard, I was like, now, this is the time, now's the time. And my teacher at the time, who's an amazing teacher, Karen Blackman, she had this yoga teacher training coming up with his school that she had practiced with. So I jumped on it. I was like, this is it. And of course, my teaching and my practice has evolved so much over time. I probably have, we had 200 hour, 500 hour. I probably have a few thousand hours of training under my belt. And I've had some really amazing, phenomenal teachers. But some of the most influential teachers are the teachers that didn't really teach me asana as such, but taught me how to live from a place of love, how to own my privilege, how to be a better human being every day, to look at the areas of my life where I was not showing up from a place of love, and to then look at those areas and see how I could. And those are definitely my greatest teachers,
Wow.
So,
No, keep going.
Yeah. So I think the second part of your question was about the depth of yoga, what I think is important. And I always say, LaMarr, if I did not believe, in the world today, I know there's so much of stereotyping of yoga, and we often view yoga as exercise and workout and so on. And I don't think there's any wrong reason for anyone to come to a yoga practice, whether it be to pick up a date or find a date or lose weight or get six-pack abs. It's all on the table. But for me, if I did not think the practice of yoga increased everyone's capacity to love one another and connected us to our own unique relationship, to our understanding of God, I would walk away from it.
Mm.
I personally have no interest in teaching a physical exercise. While nothing is wrong with that stuff, and Pilates and Zumba and aerobics and CrossFit and that kind of stuff, that's not what drives me. And if I didn't think yoga at its core gave people a life-altering shift in which they learn to love and connect to their understanding of God in a deeper way, I would walk away from it today, right now.
Mm. Wow. Well, yoga is essentially an Indian system where beliefs and spirituality are far different than in maybe, say, the Catholic Church where you grew up in Trinidad.
Yeah.
How easy or even feasible for folks from Trinidad and Tobago to embrace yoga? are you seeing any cultural divides? I know in some of the Christian churches that I'm seeing, when you talk about yoga, people get nervous. Someone came to my house and they saw a statue of a Buddha on my stairs, but you also saw an Ankh from Africa. You also saw that. Talk to me about the cultural divide that may exist in your culture as opposed to the culture where, quote unquote, this practice of yoga was invented or created.
Yeah, sure. But before I get to that really quick, I will mention, because I think it might be interesting to some of your listeners, for a majority of yoga culture and the lineage of yoga, it is definitely from India, for the most part. Mm-hmm. But there are also, there's Tibetan yoga, there's Kemetic yoga, which comes from Egypt and Africa. Mm-hmm. So I try, when people talk to me about the lineage and tradition of yoga, I ask a question, well, does it really matter? Doesn't matter. Because yoga, the very first teaching of yoga says that yoga is now. So it's right now. It's a personal practice, right? In every moment. So while the lineage and history of yoga is important, it's so much bigger than that, right? So to answer your question, there has absolutely been some pushback over years. Now, I do have to say the majority of Trinidad's population is African and Indian, right? So there is a really strong presence of yoga here already, but it's mainly within Indian heritages or Indian communities. So here comes this Middle Eastern Trinidadian guy teaching yoga. What the hell did he know about yoga? Fellas, he comes from a Catholic home. Who is he? What is he teaching? He doesn't know about yoga. But what I can say, LaMarr, is I honestly believe that, the practice of yoga is not about religion. It's not about heritage. It's not about lineage. What the practice of yoga is, it deepens our relationship to our mind and our breath. And that alone will change someone's life completely. And what I would say is, I've had a lot of pushback, but I navigated well in that one of my teachers, she was the first teacher I ever heard bring God into the practice room. When I did my first teacher training, I was actually told, do not talk about God. Don't bring God into the room. And then here comes this woman, Sean Corn is her name. She's from LA, or from New York, lives in LA. And she brought God into the practice room. And I was like, she gave me permission to do this. She showed me how I could do this. So every time I begin a class, I invite practitioners to connect to the God of their own understanding. And for me, to make the practice of yoga more accessible, I have chosen not to chant in class. So I don't chant Om in class while I might do it in my own practice, because it's important for me that I believe the practice has so much more to offer that I would not want to turn anyone away from it. I believe it is an inclusive practice, not an exclusive practice. And if I have to soften certain areas somewhat to make it more accessible, I will do so. Because I think ultimately it is about breath. And I would say to anyone who is resistant that the things we are told doesn't mean it's true. Because we come from a tradition that has repeated a certain teaching for hundreds of years, doesn't make that teaching true or right. Because you might come from a community that tells you that yoga is this or yoga is that, it doesn't mean it's right. It doesn't mean that that narrative is true. And I would invite them to expand their experiences and step into themselves and see how it feels to them. Because for me, the practice of yoga has deepened my relationship to God. in a really, and by God, I mean my relationship to Christ in a very profound way. I now understand the teachings of Jesus in a whole different way. And, that relationship to breath, I always say when I first understood what the anatomy of breath was, and I began to apply that to my yoga practice, it was a game changer for me. And what that really is, I'll take a moment here just to mention that, because I think, LaMarr, for you and your listeners, it as it was for me, it's a profound realization. But I discovered that the word spirit, like Holy Spirit, comes from the Latin word spiritus.
Yeah.
And it means to breathe. So 23,000 times a day, imagine that God is making love to you, but no one's paying attention to it. We're living our lives as if breath was this automatic thing. And sure, it's automatic to us when we come out of the womb, but it can be intentional. And if we develop this relationship and understanding of breath and how it moves through our body, it will by all means change our lives. And what also landed for me is, I come in here, I actually listened to one of your last podcasts on manifestation, and I can't remember a lady's name. But manifestation, Victoria, yeah. So to me, this is important because to me, manifestation is a new age term for prayer. And if there's some form of divine agency that is moving through our body, then I would invite people to consider that prayer is not something you do when you go to church. It's not something you do when you go to temple or mosque or 15 minutes in the morning and 15 minutes at night. We are living embodiments of prayer. Everything we do is a prayer. Every word, every action, every thought is a prayer. We are praying. And the world right now there's so much misalignment and chaos. Because even when we don't realize we're praying, we're still praying. And that's the same thing with manifestation that people need to start to put their finger on. We manifest not only when, I want more money, I want a new job, I want a book deal. We manifest even when we don't realize we're manifesting. So if I walk down, for example, if I walk down the street and I see a homeless person who's hungry and I walk past him because I'm in a hurry or because I think he's going to buy drugs, unconsciously, that is what I'm cultivating in the world. I'm cultivating an energy or consciousness in which we deny brothers and sisters in need. Whereas if I was simply to stop and take a few minutes out of my day to feed someone who is hungry, that becomes what I'm cultivating more of in our world. Consciously, the consciousness that connects all of us, I begin to impact that. So to close this, LaMarr, I know I've been going on for a little while. I could go on and on and on. But I think it's important for us to acknowledge that we are living embodiments of prayer. We are living embodiments of manifestation. And we need to not just bring awareness to what we're manifesting and praying for consciously, but to live more intentionally and bring awareness to what the things we do and pray for unconsciously. And to me, the practice of yoga, through deepening our relationship to our mind and our breath, if practiced in a very intentional way, gives us the ability to live our lives with more intention.
Yeah, my word for 2022, and it's going to carry over in 2023, is what you said, the intention, the power of intention, the power of putting something out there and watching it manifest in real time. And you are a living embodiment of it, someone who lived in America, who's gone back home, who is a part of the Gaia program. I love the TV shows, the podcasts, for you to be able to do that. And then to be engaging people across the country by using this sort of platform. But I also know that the COVID outbreak affected a lot of people in your business. I stopped going to yoga classes because of COVID. The COVID outbreak occurred, almost 2 years ago. How would you say, how did it affect your yoga classes? And how do you view yoga's role in keeping the mind and body calm during these times when many of us have been frequently isolated?
Yeah. Well, our yoga studio is currently closed, our physical studio. So that gives you an inclination as to how it impacted our studio. We were struggling through it for a little while. And then eventually our landlord kind of raised our rent by like 6 times what we were paying before. So we could no longer do it on the verge of opening up and now coming out of lockdown as such. But we do now have an online platform, which has allowed a lot of people internationally who couldn't study with me before to come on and study. So there are pros and cons to that. We are opening our physical studio, reopening next year, January or February. So that's exciting. With regards to COVID and the pandemic, I would say, LaMarr, I'm not married, I have no kids. I live in a forest alone. And generally, I enjoy solitude and quietness, but I'm a social creature. I also love people. I love coming into society and community and all that kind of stuff. And I don't think I realized how much I needed it. Because to be alone, alone without any human interaction and in a forest alone for prolonged periods of time, it was very interesting. And what I did realize and recognize is the value of human connection and human interaction. There are some days where I would be home alone and I would drive into town just to buy something over a counter, just to make someone smile or for them to make me smile and have that interaction. And the second I did, energetically, there's something that happens and you feel it. If you pay attention, you feel it. And we are all so powerful human beings, and human relationship is so important. What I would say is, there's a teaching in yoga that says mind is king of everything. And what that is so powerful if we begin to unpack it. Right now behind me, there's a white wall. But what if I told you that wall was blue? You would tell me, well, I was crazy, I was wrong, or colorblind. But what if my entire life I was told that was color blue? Then you can't convince me otherwise unless I choose to believe otherwise. If I came into this podcast, LaMarr, thinking that it was going to be a complete disaster and that LaMarr was not a cool dude, then chances are it would be a disaster and you would not be a cool dude to me because I've already created that narrative. I've chosen to believe that narrative. And we do this in our lives every day. We hear somebody say something about someone or somebody did something, and we create these narratives about people that we believe as truth and fact. That's how powerful the mind is. And all anxiety, all stress, all loneliness even, all of these experiences and emotions, they live in the mind. They all live here. Now, there's a second part to that teaching, right? It says the mind is king of everything, but breath is king of the mind. It's from BKS Iyengar.
Yes.
So what I would invite and encourage people to do, even outside of the pandemic, because we now live in a world where we are overcome with anxiety and depression and stress. Your mind is the most powerful thing you have access to, your mind and your breath. And now we know that we can relate breath to God or spirit. So it only makes sense, right? That is king of the mind. But think of the mind as an eternal marriage. but there's no separation and there's no divorce. There's no way out of your relationship to your mind. And at the foundation of any holistic marriage, are you married, LaMarr?
No.
Yeah. No.
No.
Well, I'm not either, but I would imagine, and I know that at the foundation of any holistic marriage is intimacy.
Indeed.
It's quality time. It's learning about your partner. It's listening to your partner. But we live in a world where no one sits with their mind. Spending time alone to us means Netflix, reading books, even listening to podcasts, or we're always on a device. What about actually spending time alone with your mind? And because we're afraid of the mind, right? And the mind's natural state is to create. And when we sit alone with the mind, we often hear and see things that we don't want to hear and see. We would rather not. But the only way to bring light to darkness is to go into darkness, to turn on the light. Like we have to see it. And the way I describe it is this. Your mind is your partner. Your mind has things it wants to show you. It wants to be heard. And like an adolescent child or a neglected partner, if we don't create the time to listen to mind, it's going to start to act out. It's going to start to scream and shout just to get our attention and be heard. And I think that if we just cultivate space in our lives to be with our mind and start to understand where our emotions, where our anxiety is coming from, what are we afraid of, that we'll find that that anxiety begins to lessen. The voice of the mind doesn't have to scream and shout as much to get our attention. And essentially, this is what meditation is, no?
Yeah, so you practice meditation, which is important to help still your mind and to also manifest certain things. But you also have a form of writing. You are constantly writing. I've read several of your writings, and you have a book out. Explain the title of your book, Popcorn in My Pocket. So what inspired you to write that piece? And then why the title?
Okay, I have to say, though, the book is not out yet.
Okay.
It's not out yet. I'm seeking representation, and I have a call with a publisher tomorrow, actually. So I am seeking representation, and the name of the book might actually change. And I have no problem talking about the book. So I do want to answer that question still, right? Mm-hmm. Because it is really, if the context of the book will not change, even if the name does change a little bit, Popcorn in My Pocket is an analogy. In that analogy, I use popcorn to simplify, to represent all the teachings and insights and revelations that we come through to in our lives. And in a world today, there's popcorn everywhere. Everybody has a teaching or insight or ideology or perspective or something they're throwing out there. But what's happening is that we're resharing them and we're talking about them, but we're not taking the time to understand what they mean. We're not taking the time to see, how does this teaching apply to my life? Where am I not embodying this? And we can only understand a teaching when we take time to embody it. Because we see something really important and profound on social media and we share it, doesn't mean we understand it. It doesn't mean we embody it. Like, what does that actually mean?
That's a different way of seeing things, because most people that I'm seeing on social media aren't embodying the things, but they're tagging other people. There's a quote that comes out, yeah, girl, I believe that. Yeah, man, right on. But no one is really embodying the things that they're saying. And quite often, as I'm reading books, it takes me a long time to read a book. Even if I'm listening to a book on Audible, or if I'm reading a book, if I'm in the gym, I'm stopping the book, I'm taking notes because I don't want to miss that point instead of just moving on away from it. And so you're right. I'm seeing a lot of stuff coming across social media where people are passing. But then when I look at the behavior of the individual, it's not in line with the quote, the scripture, from any holy books, the Quran, Bhagavad Gita, meditations. It's just, I'm throwing these things out. And so it's important for you to talk about embodying these things that are coming to, especially if they are building up your soul, if they're making you feel good about who you are. Yeah, it's good to share them, but it's also good to embody these things, because then we move on to the next thing. Instead of going back and say, let me reflect on this quote. Let me reflect on this prayer. Let me go back to the song that I was listening to as I was driving into work, instead of just passing it on without taking it in. Because what I was taught from several teachers, unless you can teach what you've been taught, then you haven't learned the lesson.
Yeah.
So you're just repeating it over and over again.
Yeah. And another perspective on it, and I to me, our dismissal a lot of the time is avoidance. So we might get a teaching and somebody might say, oh, that doesn't apply to me. But it doesn't apply to you because you're not ready to see where it applies. And it's a lot easier, for example, if you told me, LaMarr, Troy lived from a place of love, and I said, that's the teaching. And I go and I look at all the places where I live from a place of love. And I say, look, I get it. But what I'm not doing is looking for all the places where I don't live from a place of love. And I always say our growth and transformation is not any things we do correctly. It's any things we are not doing correctly. And we have to have the courage to look into that darkness and see where we can do better. While it's important to hold up the places where we're doing great things, it's really important to look at where we can do better. And this is where the pocket comes in. So a pocket is an analogy for everyone having their own spiritual pocket. So it's not about taking everyone else's popcorn and flinging it around. It's about taking popcorn that connects to you, putting it in your pocket, seeing how it feels. And what this book is about, LaMarr, essentially, is me sharing teachings and insights that I have come to know, but also experiences in my life in which represent these teachings, not just in a good way, but in a negative way, where I was not accountable, where I was not authentic, stuff like that, where I did not show up from a place of love, but really showing this so that the idea is it would inspire the reader, not just to take my popcorn and share it, but to actually see how does it fit into their life and how does it fit in their pocket. This is so important that we start to really embody and ask these questions and look at where we can embody these things more and what are we not seeing that we need to be seeing.
As you start to write this book, and even though you said that the title may change, what are some of the most important lessons that you've learned from even putting these words down on the page, from working with clients in and out of your country, from being in isolation for so long? What are the most important lessons you've learned over the last 5 years?
Wow. In writing this book or outside of that?
In writing this book.
Yeah. I would say that the book was really interesting because it got me to question things I believed. It got me to dig into them deeper. Because as I was writing this book, I thought it was finished about 6 times. And now I can finally say it's pretty much finished. It's ready for agent or whatever it is. But what I noticed was that as I was writing, if someone knew me, if LaMarr knew me for 3, 4, 5 years and understood what I was talking about, they would get it. They would get what I was trying to say. But if I put myself in the headspace of someone that didn't know Troy Hadeed or didn't know who Troy Hadeed was or what Troy Hadeed represented or wasn't familiar with these teachings, they probably wouldn't get it. It wouldn't make sense to them. So what it did was force me to dig into my own teachings, my own perspectives, and unravel them layer by layer to see how can I make this more digestible? How can I make this more palatable and more accessible to people that may not quite get it? And I think that's so important, even outside of writing, as we live our lives, because we identify with our beliefs and our opinions, and generally we find ourselves in social circles that also identify with similar things. But how do we reach people outside of that? How do we connect to people outside of that? And I think this whole process helped me do that, because I had to rip apart my own beliefs layer by layer. But it also helped me to understand who I am and why I am the way I am. And one example of that was, I love to talk about privilege. And one of my chapters in my book is called Owning Privilege. And I always say, LaMarr, I come from privilege in a lot of ways. I can't even count, right? We often talk about race, finances, social status, gender, all that kind of stuff, right? So I come from privilege in a lot of ways. But what I began to identify was that there is the most powerful privilege of all is not being acknowledged and spoken of enough. And that is the privilege of knowing what it is to be loved. To come from a place where you know what love is, you know what it means to be supported, you know what it means to feel secure. To that sense of community, to have someone there to show you what is right and what is wrong, that is a privilege. And the millions of people who don't have that. So it's easy to look at someone and say, you should know better. But what if they were never shown better? What if their understanding of love is conditional or abusive or oppressive? And we keep talking about love. So to them, they think that's what love is. But our understanding of love has become really conditional. So for me, it was very powerful to begin to unravel these circumstances that have shaped me into the man I am today. And a lot of that was security, safety, love, and acceptance, which is things that I have always had from my family and my communities and my social circles. And acknowledging that now helps me reach and relate to people who might not have that. So I think it really helped me dig down and understand who I was and what shaped me as an individual and what has actually crafted these teachings.
So there's someone listening out there who is very appreciative of what you're saying. I am one of those individuals. There's also somebody out there who wants to know, how do they get involved in a yoga practice and they don't know where to begin? How do they get involved in breath work and they don't know where to begin? How do they learn how to manifest and they don't know where to begin? Walk us through your process to help people find their way if they want to not only just join your practice, but a simple way who's interested in getting involved in a yoga practice.
Yeah.
Don't know where to start.
What I would do, we have this amazing thing now, LaMarr, called Google.
Mm.
And really and truly, I think anyone, anywhere in the world can Google yoga classes, meditation classes, and they will find a variety of offerings wherever they live for the most part. There are also a lot of offerings online. And the reality is that not everyone is comfortable walking into yoga studios. Sometimes it could be intimidating for people. It could be scary for people.
I know it was for me. My first yoga instructor, Will, I'll never forget when people say yoga one-on-one, there is no such thing as yoga one-on-one. Yoga is you going right in and doing whatever the other people are actually doing. And I appreciated that. But Will was such a great teacher. He used upbeat music. It wasn't like slow. It wasn't so it was really new to me. But when he's like, "Oh, this is yoga," I'm like, "No, dude, Yoga 101 was like just the first day. The next day I was out there doing, but continue what you said. I know about the intimidation coming in, being a teacher, thinking I know everything, and then actually have to just let my guard down and to be a student. Like, this is not my space. This is his space. This is her space. I am here as a student to then learn, but it can be intimidating.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would say, and I would let people know, and I say this all the time, when you walk into a practice space, for the most part, if you find a really solid, intimate practice space, whether it be meditation or asana or anything, no one has any time to worry about you.
Let me just.
No one is taking you on.
Let me just say this, Troy. It's so funny you would say that, because I remember my best friend David and I, we started this practice together. And let me pull out my male hat. All of my guys were like, "Yo, man, how can you concentrate with all these women, their butts in your faces?" I said, let me just be real clear. I am trying to make sure I don't look like an ass and fall over. So I'm not concentrating on, and nobody is definitely looking at us. And the moment that you take your mind somewhere else, literally you fall. And like today's practice was, mine was like, put your intention and your awareness on one thing in where I am right now. And the moment I look somewhere else, so again, you're right. No one is in there, at least the one I go to, where I feel I'm judging someone or they're judging me. Yoga is like when I started running a marathons. My trainer, Chauncey, he says, "Yo, man, when you start running a marathon, you're going to see all body shapes, all sizes, all nationalities, people doing strange stuff, juggling, people cycling, but the goal is to get to the finish line."
Yeah, absolutely. And there's every yoga class is a little different, right? Every teacher is a little different. But if you find a good studio, and there are a lot of them out there, two things I would say. There's nothing wrong with asking a teacher, "Can you make space for me at the back of the class? This is my first class." No matter what, any solid teacher is going to do that for you. Secondly, at any point in class, you can lie on your back, you can fall asleep, you can rest. That is a common thing. I always say, if someone walked into my class and they lie in Shavasana on their backs for the entire class, that is the most advanced practitioner, because they have nothing to prove, right? They're out, their ego has no hold on them. They know what they need and they're taking it. And that's so powerful. So nothing is wrong. You can rest at any point you like, right? You just do what you can do. When you need to rest, you rest. I also want to say, though, I know online has become really convenient for some people. I want to put a point and say, there's nothing like a physical presence of a teacher and community.
I agree.
So
man.
If you can get in a studio, get in a studio, because online is great. And I teach online classes. I even do online privates, one-on-one, which is amazing. But there is nothing like
community. I mean, it's nothing like community prayer, community meditation, community singing, community dancing is nothing like feeling somebody else's energy, because we're energy beings, energy in your space. And I really appreciate you saying that, lying on your back, because I would never forget, like, you know, my teachers, like, if you can go there, stretch, go where it's comfortable to you. If you need to stop, you need to pause. But that being in the back of the room, man, I'll never forget when I first started coming in late and I was in the front. I was like, oh, Lord, I got to go to the front of the class. I felt like that kid in class, you know, the kid in class, the teacher says, come to the front, and you feel embarrassed and things like that. But I think it's important when you share that you're coming for your own practice. We have to get to the point where we have to remove what other people think, because we all are there. Like, even when you go, I tell people the church, the mosque, the synagogue, they're full of sick people. They go there for some type of blessing, for some type of lesson. So there's no reason to judge one another. And it's amazing. The person who you think can't do the practices, they're stretching. Like, I've seen people that I'm like, whoa, how did you do that with that body size, with that body type? and you come in, you looking like quote unquote the most healthiest person, and your body is not at that level. So I definitely appreciate those practical strategies. But before you leave, you have to let our listeners know how they can get in contact with you.
Yeah, I'm on Instagram, Troy Hadeed. They can find me at troyhadeed.com. And they can also find me on our online yoga platform, beyondyogatv.com. And there's 30 days free if they sign up. And I also do privates, which online. So if anybody wants coaching or privates, I would gladly, really be happy to help them out. And I would encourage people to follow me on Instagram, to join my email list on my newsletter, because this book is coming. It's going to be so powerful. And I would love to share it with them and love them to get the news as soon as it comes out.
So before I get to my final questions, can you take us quickly through just some breath work? I know for those folks that are out there driving, we ask you to pull over. If you're listening to this, we ask you to pull over and do that. But just walk us through some breath work that someone can use, just an initial piece on a day-to-day practice.
Sure. Well, the first thing I would say, LaMarr, is the first thing we have to understand about breath is that we do not pull air into our bodies. When we inhale, we don't pull air into our bodies, right? It's about shape change. So the more we can expand the rib cage side to side, the diaphragm descends, the chest lifts, even your back body, more we can expand the body is the more breath we can receive, right? Breath works from a difference in pressure. When we expand volume, we lower air pressure inside of us, which means that the air pressure outside is now higher, so that air is pushed inside of us. So that's the first thing we need to understand. So now with that very brief introduction, sit up nice and tall for me and close your eyes. And I would always invite practitioners to elevate their hips above their knees to allow space in their body. And I want you first to just look at your breath. Look at your breath. Feel your body. Feel if your body is uncomfortable or tight. And also look at your mind. Look at your thoughts, whether it's anxious or running all over the place or trying to get back to your day. Just look at it, because if we look at breath, body, and mind as relationship, the very first step to intimacy is listening. It's just looking. And then I want you to just look, as you look at the breath, focus on the breath. See if you can focus on the breath without influencing the breath. It's very hard to do. And then as you come to the bottom of your next exhale, I want you to pause and start breathing deeply. Big, long inhales. But as you inhale, feel your ribcage expand left to right. Feel your chest expand. Imagine you had lungs in the back of your body. And then exhale. So I'm not going to count because the listeners all have different breath capacities. So I just want you to breathe long, smooth, and deep on your own count. But the breath should never be strained or stressed. So you just expand. Think of creating space in your body. The more space you can create, the more breath you can receive. And now, if you're comfortable with this idea, think of breath as your understanding of God. Think of your breath being in communion with God. That is how God communicates to you, one of the ways at least. And think to yourself, what kind of emotion do I want? What kind of energy do I want in my breath? Allow your breath to feel welcome. Allow your breath to feel safe. And then at the bottom of your next exhale, gently open your eyes. Yeah, and come back in. I didn't know how long you wanted me to go for, LaMarr. We could have been there for the next 60 minutes.
That was great. You were great. I told you, listeners, you were in for a treat, but you cannot leave, Troy, because the second part of the show is called the Super Bomb Questions. But the first part is I need you to respond to them as quickly as possible without any commentary. Are you ready, Troy, to go?
I'll try my best. Let's go.
Let's go. What's your favorite word?
Love.
What's your favorite quote?
Truth without compassion is cruelty.
What's your superpower?
Love.
What's your spirit animal?
Hawk.
What moves you to tears of joy?
Seeing people grow and transform.
What moves you to tears of sorrow?
Seeing a separation and otherness in our world.
What do you wish you had more time to do?
Love people.
What is the book or books you've given as a gift and why?
The Alchemist.
What's your morning routine?
Wake up, drink coffee, practice yoga, write.
What guides your heart?
God.
If you could tell one person you appreciate them, who would it be and why?
My mom.
What is the advice that you're glad that you ignored?
Make money. Money's the best thing. Make lots of money. Make lots of money.
If you were in the Mr. Trinidad and Tobago talent competition, Troy Hadeed, what would your talent be?
Yoga.
Brother Troy, man, I feel everything that you shared with me, and I know my audience feel the same way, man. It is an honor. It's been an honor hanging out with you, man. Talking to you reminds me of talking to my good friend, Brother Mark Laveau, who is from Trinidad and Tobago as well, and all my other Trini people, and also my homeopathic doctor. Shout out to Dr. Ian Noel, who's also Trini. So I thank you, brother, for hanging out with me today. It's been a pleasure talking to you.
It is an honor, LaMarr, and I will be back anytime. And you have a home in Trinidad. Sounds like you have a few, but anytime you want to come and visit, you're more than welcome, brother. I'll be glad to have you and host you.
Hey, believe me, I'm going to take you up on that. So I thank you again, but